We would like to welcome you here for this exciting workshop today called Diversity and Gender in Healthcare Robotics. This workshop is hosted by the Robotics for EU project, the Robotics for EU is a 3-year-long project funded under the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. And our goal is to explore the non-technological aspects of artificial intelligence-based robots. We have today 2 very competent keynoters who have done a great deal of research in this area. We are excited to hear your experiences and your views of diversity and gender in robotics, and to discuss how we as a society can progress toward more inclusive healthcare technologies. And now my colleague Anneli Rose will tell you more about the Robotics for EU project. The floor is yours, Anneli.
Thank you very much. I welcome everyone at this very interesting and important workshop. And as the coordinator of Robotics for EU project, I'm glad to introduce you very, very briefly. What is the project about? So we are focusing on 4 areas on agri-food, HR production, healthcare, and infrastructure robots. And we are dealing with non-technological aspects of robotics. So while I think we all agree that it is possible to develop robots in different ways, and we have the capacities, and also robots are a source of economic growth, at the same time also concerns about the rapid growth of robotics technologies arises. But if we want to benefit from new technologies, then definitely we have to also address the societal concerns which are there. And here at this workshop today, we are talking about diversity and gender related to robots, research and development, which is a crucial topic. So we are focusing in our research and practical activities on the non-technological aspects of robots, which next to the gender and diversity issues also cover ethical topics, cybersecurity, data management, and as you see here from the slide also, legal issues. When we asked more than 1,000 people and 29% of our respondents were from healthcare sector, we realized that what concerns people is, of course, the fear of technological unemployment, the safety topics, also accountability, lowering the risks which are related to the development of technologies and the adoption by the citizens and professional users. So this is why this discussion around diversity and also gender, that how gender topics influence the uptake of new technologies are so crucial. And I'm really glad to tell you that next to different researches and workshops, we are also planning to develop some practical tools for the community. And one of them is the maturity assessment model. We are aware that there are different tools in Europe developed already, but our colleagues from LNE France, they are working currently on a tool which is called Responsible Robotics Maturity Assessment Model. So how do we measure, or how do we know that a robot is responsible? And what we mean by that is that a robot is developed together with the end users, with citizens, and it really considers, next to being perfect in terms of technology, also the societal impact, what it has. And one of those dimensions is definitely gender. So, and our consortium consists of wonderful partners representing also different sectors. So we are ourselves also diverse, and we hope that this is a benefit, and we are sure that this is a benefit for the results of this project. So you see that we have partners from universities, from industry, and also from citizens, so to say, that who are the actual users of the technologies. So I wish you a very interesting workshop with fascinating speakers whom we have invited today here, and hopefully we continue our collaboration also after this workshop. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to my colleague Annelie Rose. The reason why healthcare is here in red is that the NTNU, as a consortium partner, our team is responsible for the healthcare area. So this workshop is actually workshop number 4 of a set of 5, all themed around healthcare and robotics in healthcare. Obviously non-technological aspects of robotics, as my colleague already said. Now, very briefly, before I give the floor to our keynotes, I would like to introduce the topic of the workshop, that is diversity and gender in robotics. And I would like to tell you more about why this is a manifold issue. That's because it encompasses diversity and gender within the robotics community. So, for example, the community of designers, of manufacturers, of users. We know that designers, programmers, for example, are predominantly men, predominantly white, and to a lesser extent, Asians are also well represented. Other ethnicities, for example, are not as well represented. And possibly relatedly, the design, a participant requested live transcription be enabled for the meeting. I suppose I should enable it. I hope it should be possible to understand clearly. So the robotics community is a relevant element in our diversity and gender in robotics reflection. But what we're actually focusing on today, and it's a related issue, and it's a design of robots. So questions pertaining to product design. We start reflecting on this issue from the image of Sophia the robot. I mean, robots are basically blank state humans. They can be designed as we wish. They don't have a race or gender. They're metal and cables and plastic. They don't have biological bodies they're born with, as we humans have. And they don't reflect on their gender identity the way we humans do. So they don't relate to their gender identity. They don't think about their gender and who they are from the point of view of gender and race. What we make of the machine reflects who we are, including our stereotypes of the designers and of society in general. You can think of robots as mirrors or maybe funhouse mirrors that give a distorted, exaggerated representation of the stereotypes that circulate in society. Particularly with humanoid genders, even subtle design choices can signify gender. There's a study by Trovato and colleagues from 2018 that shows that when shown images of humanoid robots, people consistently choose a particular pronoun to go along with the robot. They tend to refer to a robot with a straight torso or big shoulder with a male pronoun, and they tend to refer to a robot with a smaller waist with a female pronoun. So what message is the body shape of the robot sending? Robot makers tend to be influenced by gender stereotypes. They may intentionally exploit gender stereotypes. For example, they can design security robots that intimidate, that project some kind of stereotypical notion of threatening masculinity. Or they may be unconsciously influenced, even with no intention of actually exploiting stereotypes or using stereotypes or infusing cliches into the product. But it doesn't have to be this way. I mean, robots could be an avenue for social change. So that's the goal of this workshop. Robots can be a catalyst for social change. Catalyst in chemistry is any substance that increases the rate of a chemical reaction without being infused itself and consumed. So can robots be designed to promote social equality? If designers challenge gender norms in the way they design robots, if they run counter to gender stereotypes that prevail in society, if they design robots that embody inclusivity, that leads users to rethink gender norms. And it can be a catalyst for a culture change, for pushing the frontiers of what we think as gender norms. Gender norms are, by the way, the attitudes toward gender that prevail in society. There are social attitudes and social behavior that are considered appropriate for a particular gender to have. And those, in gender studies, we call gender norms. And gender cues may be embedded or embodied in social robots in multiple ways. For example, in the appearance, in the color, in the skin tone, in the voice of the robot, in the voice. Lower pitch embodies authority. The accent is very important in some countries. For example, in the UK, it reflects social class. The name of the robot can be more male stereotypical or female stereotypical. The behavior of the robot also includes some gender cues, race cues, the touching, the gait, the posture, the kind of humor that the robot may or may not have, how assertive is the attitude of the robot toward the user, or how polite or how dry. So ideally, designers should aim for gender inclusive design, which is the opposite of gender stereotypical. It's naive to claim that the design of robots can be gender blind. It should consider instead the needs of multiple social groups. We don't want, we know that many tasks in societies are typically performed by women, for example, domestic labor or various types of low-paid work. If we gender robots as female for what is seen socially as women's work, that may reinforce social inequality, that may further normalize that type of social inequality. A male receptionist robot or a domestic labor male robot may actually act as a catalyst by challenging stereotypes. Especially because we live in a society where robots are, they're everywhere in our everyday life. They're no longer confined to factories. They are designed to resemble humans and to interact with humans in hospitals, in classrooms, in homes, in security, or even in the sex industry. We don't want to build robots that reinforce and validate gender norms. We want to challenge and run counter to gender stereotypes. We want possibly to design robots that can be customized, where users choose features, robots that are gender fluid, and design possibly robot-specific identities that bypass social stereotypes in a very original manner. But I will now give the floor to our first speaker. I am very pleased to have here as our speaker, Dr. Eduard Forsk Villaronga. He's an assistant professor at the ELO Center for Law and Digital Technologies at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. Dr. Forsk Villaronga investigates legal and regulatory aspects of robots and AI technology, and his particular special focus is on healthcare robotics. He is the author of the two books that you see in this slide, AI for Healthcare Robotics and Robots, Healthcare and the Law, Regulating Automation in Personal Care. He's interested in human-robots interaction, responsible innovation, and the future of law. So, Eduard, the floor is yours. I will now stop sharing my slides so you can share yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, but especially for having me here. I'm really, really happy to be part of Robotics for EU. I think that it's an amazing project, and I'm so excited to see that there's such a big consortium like looking precisely at all of these issues, especially like on how social science can very much have a critical informed vision on the development and use of robotics, but at the same time that we are zooming in these aspects that are so important, no, diversity and gender and even beyond, no. So my presentation for today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've been seeing diversity throughout my work and how this relates on the topics of this workshop. So I'm going to share with you like an ongoing project that we have, that it's behind the idea of having a science for robot policies. I'm going to show you a couple of experiments that we have been doing and what are the findings that we had. And then how then we looked at the framework, because we come from the School of Law. So like we look at the laws and like how then the laws are informing the diversity considerations or not. And then I'm going to close the talk talking about how important it is to account for diversity and what are the takeaways from this talk. So the technology that I chose for today to discuss, it's exoskeleton technology. They are wearable robotics that they are fastened to the body, and their big mission, it is actually to help wheelchair users stand up and walk again. There is actually an incredible progress that right now, as you can see in the video here, the progress is so much that basically like researchers are working in very lightweight devices that they are trying to integrate in a seamless manner with the user's gait, and that they are trying like to try to get as much exercise as possible, and also to have mobility that the wheelchair is not allowing to. So right now there are like many companies working on this, and each company are using their own exoskeletons and their own systems. So the project that I am involved with right now, it's a European project called Eurobench, and they realized that what it would be great, it is to have some sort of standardization of these devices, also with respect to the tests. No, Sophia was saying like the importance of designing these robots, no, in a way or in another, because they will have an ulterior impact on the users that they will be, in this case, wearing the devices. So what they did, the Eurobench project, is to create something amazing, that is basically to create a robot testing facility in which different companies can come and they can do different robot tests, so that then they can improve their devices according to different tests. So for instance, there are like different tests that they measure how much an exoskeleton can climb stairs. So whether it is like 15 centimeters of the step or even more. Then we have some on working on uneven terrains or slopes, so that we sort of like try to simulate real environments, and we do experiments to gather a little bit of an understanding of how robotics can be improved into that. And our project that we have within Eurobench is in an FSTP project that is called Propelling, and it means pushing forward robot development for lawmaking. And we are a team of researchers, and together with me we have Carlos Calleja, he's now a PhD student in Oslo, actually, and also Hadassah Drukar, that she's with us now at Dillon. And our main idea of the goal, which is a little bit different from this, is that what we notice is that sometimes the laws governing these devices are a little bit outdated. They were created in a moment in which the technology was not there yet. So it may be possible that there are some disconnects between the technology that we have and the laws that we have. So what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to investigate to what extent test beds can generate policy relevant data for speeding the creation, revision, or discontinuation of norms governing robot technology. So the idea that we have is that, well, maybe we can generate some data in this respect and then inform the laws, that maybe then we can help the laws to be a little bit more updated and catch up with the reality that we have. In short, what we call it is science for robot policies. And one of the topics that we want to investigate is actually the falls and also like the fear of falling. When we are using a robot, it may be possible that the robot falls down. And you can imagine that if it is an exoskeleton that it is actually wearing a person and the person falls down, that can actually lead to a very critical situation and harm the person. So we are trying to understand how falls are being contemplated, but also the fear of falling. No, like these people have been in a wheelchair for 7 years, for instance, and they are just now being asked to walk, on a device. So we want to see like how these cognitive aspects play a role into the design of the device. But also what we are actually currently doing right now, it is to try to develop a little bit more of knowledge on protective stops. So basically all robots have a red big button in which you can stop the task that is being performed by the robot. But there's not that much knowledge in which moments these stops can be activated and what are the consequences of that. So what we did, and we will get to the diversity considerations very soon, it is to have like some experiments with different subjects. And the subject that we had, it is Joseph Luis. He suffered from a stroke 7 years ago, even if he believes that it was 7 months ago, that he came to do the experiments with us. And he came with his family that basically act as a very much of a support for him. And also so Gloria, the partner, and Jordi, the son, that he was also a subject in our experiments. And what we did, it is like to try to put the exoskeletons then like on them and try to do like some experiments. So what we started realizing is that when we had Hadassah to try to use the exoskeleton, we realized that the device was doing an incredible noise. And basically we had to put the device like to the maximum capacity of it, like so as it is. And you can see, right, like Hadassah is not overweight, but all the women started complaining that the device was not fitting themselves, that it was hurting their in the hip, and that actually was very uncomfortable. And we started like wondering like, oh, like this is actually strange, because we used it with male subjects and this was not reported from them. And the male subjects were even a little bit bigger. So we would say, well, you had like a different body size that would be in theory slimmer and would fit better the device, but that was actually not reported the case. And what we started seeing then when we started looking at the data is that for the subjects that we were looking at that moment, the stress levels were completely different. So whereas the male subject reported a stress level of normal, the female subject was actually way more stressed, as you can see in the image. And also we understood that the energy expenditure was completely different also. The woman in the experiment was spending much more energy than the male. And well, at the beginning we thought, well, maybe it is just because we have like a couple of subjects and maybe this is just like a casualty, you know? But then, like when we tried the exoskeleton with the what they call non-healthy subject, so that's already revealing on how they are addressed, these subjects. So when we tried the device with the non-healthy subject, as they call it, then we realized that the facility was really not prepared to accommodate the health condition of the patient. And we were very much astonished by the fact that in theory, these devices are meant to be helping wheelchair users. So like users that they have a health condition, that they might have different episodes of disorientation, and that they also are of a certain body shape due to the fact that as they do not get that much exercise, and so usually they tend to be of a larger size. So all of these started like resonating inside of us into trying to think, okay, so users of exoskeleton technology might come in different shapes and different genders and sex. Do we have in the norms some provisions that establish different safety measures and safety safeguards to ensure that that these exoskeletons are designed to fit different types of the population? And then we looked at the norm that was governing these devices, that in this case is the ISO 13482 on personal on safety requirements for personal care robots. And this standard is for personal care robots, which are service robotics that perform actions contributing directly towards improvement in the quality of life of humans. And they have like different robots there, the mobile servant robot. Then they have also the person carrier robot, the robot that transports a person from point A to point B. And then also physical assistant robots that would be the category where lower limb exoskeletons are their place. And this standard was born because safety, the threat of physical harm to a person is an ever-present concern, right? Like especially when you're wearing an exoskeleton, you may really much think that the safety of the user is very much important. You want to prevent that person from falling, and you want to ensure that they are working normally. But the problem of this is that when we are interacting with robot technology, we do not only interact in a way that it is physical. So one of the first problems that we started noticing is that the standard relies very much on the concept that safety is physical. And whereas that it is for sure like very important, there are moments in which we are interacting with robot technology in another way. Imagine, for instance, robots that they're used in therapeutic settings for non-neurotypical children. In those moments, although it is very important that the robot is safe physically talking, no, that it does not electrocute the children, for instance, what it is also important is to ensure that the human robot interaction is safe. But this is not happening at the physical level, but it's more like at the psychological level, no? And this is very important if we think that we're growing to the emotional recognition systems and so on. But then there are other dimensions that they are not that much taken into account in the standard, which is the fact that these robots are cyber physical machines. So they have cyber components, but also physical components, that the interaction is a little bit different, but also that the interaction have a temporal aspect, no? So like basically users that interact with exoskeletons and that they will be wearing them, it may be possible that their condition will be worsened over time. And this means that the uniqueness of each of the users and the personal characteristics of the users may also change over time in a positive or in a negative way, but that the temporal dimension, it is also extremely important. Coming back to the topic of my talk of today, also what we realized is that the standard does not really account for diversity. And this was a little bit astonishing for us, because then when you read the standard in the introduction, and you can see it here below, it says, this was in 2014, that future editions of these international standards might include more specific requirements on particular types of personal care robots, as well as more complete numeric data for different categories of people, like children, elderly persons, or pregnant women. As if somehow these people could wait until the industry would create a standard for them to use. Then we started thinking, okay, so I think that actually it's the other way around. It seems to us that These categories are what often in the law, they are referred as vulnerable populations, that maybe they deserve extra care, but nevertheless, in the norm that governs these systems, they are disregarded. And as you can see in the different images, exoskeletons users and context of use are very different, which it could involve in the military, which it is the first time where they were born, these devices, in the industry, but for sure in rehabilitation. No, this is what we are talking about in here. And although adult populations may have more or less a similar way of approaching the topic, when it comes, for instance, to children, instead of relearning a lost function, what children need to do, it is to learn how to walk. So the principles of the design of the technology and how the task will be performed are completely different. And in this case, children are very much at risk of outgrowing the device because they grow as much fast as compared to adults, and so on. So together with Roger, Sora, or Roger, we wrote this paper some time ago, trying to reflect a little bit on all of these considerations. And although this was a theoretical first approach to the topic, right now, when we are taking all of these experiments in practice, we realize that actually it is totally true. All the users come in different shapes and sizes and genders and sex, and all of these considerations that make us unique, they are not being taken into consideration in exoskeleton design. And in a way, usually robot developers are called upon because they are usually so focused on trying to solve a technical problem or making the robot work that they usually are oblivious to the broader implications that their technology may have to users. But in this case, I need to say that from my expertise, coming from the School of Law, being involved in policy, and so I also need to call upon regulators and also standard makers and say, well, but you knew in 2014 that potentially these users needed extra safeguards. You didn't do anything back then. And then when you revised this norm in 2020, then you revised the document without any update in this respect. And what we continuously see here in the experiments right now that we are in Madrid again, doing in the robot testing zone again, we continuously see women sliding inside of the device because the trunk of the exoskeleton, because what happens actually is that they take the measures of the femur and the tibia, so basically the bones that they go in the leg. But what happens is that it is as essential to support the user also the part of the trunk. And the part of the trunk of the body, it is completely different for many reasons, but also the anatomy of men, women, they are completely different, and not taking them into account may lead to a safety issue. So accounting for diversity, it is extremely important. And this is a sentence I usually say: the sugar industry is not interested in your health, right? We need sometimes to stress that all of these standards, even if they are with good intentions, we need to understand that they are usually developed in a way that it's companies that they have written them, but that user groups and affected users are not part of those discussions. So it is normal that then they are oblivious to the importance that that these devices will have an ulterior impact into different populations. And that is why it is so important to have projects like Robotics for EU, so that then you guys can bring together all of these different stakeholders and also engage in standardization activities that actually give voice to these communities that they have been not taken into account for so long. So this is very important because when we present a robotic device as a technical solution, we are also constructing normality. Like we're also constructing and constraining, no, the normality and like the reality that we have, and that has an impact. That has an impact because it excludes many users. So like something that it is meant to be helping users, it is actually excluding them. And lack of diversity is beyond a safety concern, especially in healthcare. It also means erasure, exclusion, and silencing, and that we need to start understanding that not only minorities, but we're also talking about female bodies. We're talking about the really large children. We're elderly people. Like we're talking about large parts of the population that actually are not yet well represented in this particular case. But we could give examples on surgery robots and in many others. But today I just wanted to talk about this. Just to finish the talk, because I know that this was a bit short and sweet talk, but accounting for sex and gender makes better science. And I think that the European Commission has been very much aware of these. And I know that our colleague Robert Sora was doing a fantastic job behind the European Union vision on having gender as a main important aspect, because it is true, we can no longer tolerate the fact that technology and developments that in theory it is for progressing as a society are just focused on male bodies. And well, of course, the gender studies people in the room might have way more to say than me, no, but we have examples as the dummies, but also like on drugs. Now it is also the moment to understand that all of these different aspects, which include the sex and gender, are important in medicine, and of course they are going to be completely essential for those robots that they are going to be in healthcare environments. Just to just show is that robotics actually have both. No, I think that Sophia was already like highlighting it before, like the importance that actually it is in the moment now that we can actually have a choice and say, are we going to support this narrative? Are we going to continue exacerbating these stereotypes that actually are harming users when you have robotics that actually have a physical embodiment and that they are like being used with users? Or we're actually going to take the opportunity that this technology is offering us to say, no, we're going to do things differently from 2022 onwards. So I think I will leave it here. I will just like put it the slide just like in case like the people that see afterwards wants to read it, but just like as takeaways, basically gender and sex considerations are not always considered in exoskeleton design, but there are obvious distinctions between different users. Tests are run primarily on healthy subjects, and they are really not prepared to accommodate non-healthy subjects yet. And these tests have not been yet implemented broadly in different body types. And this is extremely important to understand even like what are the safety concerns relating to this. So we are at the very much beginning of this. And also, this is in my domain, but standards that govern the safety of these devices should have explicit recommendations to integrate safeguards for different categories of users at risk that otherwise we will be putting technology into the market that can be certified as safe, certified with the CE marking because it's against this standard, and enter the European market and in reality not being safe to use. And of course, diversity considerations is not only the design of the robot. It is also the test that needs to be diverse. It is also the laws. It is also the community that we are going to be using that. In these days, we are actually gathering more data on all of these identified aspects. So maybe next year, if there is another workshop, I can present even more, but we had a lot of different subjects now, and we're gathering amazing data also on how different body shapes and genders and sex are influencing this. So we are really excited about that. And we are going to send recommendations to ISO in written form so that hopefully they take it into account in their future. So I'll leave it here. Thank you so much for having me. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me.
Our second speaker is Dr. Ingvild Førland Hestren, Associate Professor of Gender Studies at the University of Stavanger. Her research at this time revolves around storytelling practices, post-human ethics in the project Caring Futures, Developing Care Ethics for Technology-Mediated Care Practices. It is a project that will further advance, develop care ethics in an increasingly technological health and welfare sector. And it even includes an art exhibition, which is something I had noticed. So very, very fascinating. This is not something that is usual or orthodox for projects to include. Very original. And Ingvild will talk about gender, care, and robots. So Ingvild, the floor is yours. I will stop sharing my slides.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this wonderful seminar. Yes, my talk is called Gender, Care and Robots. As you mentioned in your introduction, Sophia, the question of gender is very central to how we think about robotics, but of course it also has implications for how we think about being human. So I came to this field of thinking with technology and care ethics from doing research on how robots in science fiction pass as human. That is, how they are embodied, what kind of expressions they have, how they come across as human or almost human. And this, of course, has a lot to do with an ideal of a universal human or universal man, as we from gender studies like to call it. But it also has a lot to do with questions of embodiment, racialization, so it's a very interesting field that I think we can learn a lot from, thinking about what is normal. But this image that you see on my screen is actually from the art exhibition, because I want to frame this talk around how also questions of care are heavily embedded with questions of gender and diversity. So traditionally, this is from the artist Ruth Gilmore that will be included in the art exhibition that opens in Stavanger in September this year. The traditional hand, the caring hand, that of course also here is frazzled at the bottom. So the act of caring is something that is actually quite, well, it's hard work to care for someone or something and to care about something or something. So in the Caring Futures project, we are trying to think about how the there's a lot of things going on with healthcare technologies and robotics that is great, as you, Edward, has demonstrated really well. Things that actually help people, that will improve the healthcare system. But our project think that there is perhaps a too little concern for care and the ethics of care in these kinds of areas. At the same time, the tradition for care ethics has nothing about technology in them. So here we see a gap in the knowledge base that we are trying to fix. So what I would like to do today is to try and think with the gendered stereotypes that you mentioned earlier, Sophia, through the framework of care. Oh, here we are. So what is care? Care means a lot of different things to different people. And I think that it's also interesting to look at who is being targeted as the subjects that need care in the healthcare industry. I think it's wonderful that Edward just demonstrated how the question of the normal and how the difficulty of standardization is actually key for understanding how care works. Can you have a standardized robots to care for everyone? As we saw with the exoskeletons, clearly not. So when we think about care and technology and care and robotics, we need to consider not just the gendered aspects and the diversity aspects, but also the individual and located positions in those where it happens. So I'm not from the field of robotics myself, but the robot Sophia has already been introduced. And here is Ari, another social robot. And I wanted to, my work has been in fiction, so I will look at some fictional robots in a minute, but I wanted to stop for a minute and look at the embodiment of these robots. Because what are the gendered stereotypes that are at play? Ari has a lovely skirt on, so that's quite perhaps easy to understand. And Sophia is, of course, very famous for being the first robot citizen. But I think there's a lot to learn from theories of science fiction in this, because how you conceptualize and embody the robot has, as I mentioned in the introduction, also something to do with how we think about being human. So if the robot is not quite human, there are many theorists that have pointed to how the robot then, we want to make them in our image, but nevertheless to make them slightly different. And so gender, racialization, and slightly off embodiment is the way to do it, because it makes both creates a distance between the actual human and the robot, and it creates recognition, but not necessarily as in something that can replace us. So going to classic gender studies, Simone de Beauvoir wrote about women as the second sex, as the second best. And we also know that there are histories of marginalized peoples where the white, universal, middle-aged man is considered the standard or normality. So I wanted to move to, I've written up an article together with two of my colleagues, Sara Orning and Aino-Kaisa Koistinen, on a TV series, a Swedish science fiction TV series called Real Humans. And I wanted to dwell on two of the robots in this series. Because many of you might not have watched the TV series at all, it's set in, actually I'll go back before revealing my slides. It's set in a near future Sweden where care robots or social robots have taken over caring functions in society. So they are taking over works in the factories, they are taking care of the elderly, they are working as domestic robots, and they are working as personal trainers, and become a part of everyday life. So in the Scandinavian countries, you could say that they have become part of the welfare state. But of course, there's also a question of money to be able to purchase one of these robots for your home. Äkta människor, or real humans, produced by the Swedish television, is interesting because it does try to diversify their robots. So you will have white robots, robots of color, you will have different kinds of robot types. But what I want to do today is to show how these robot types also not necessarily diversify the question of robotics, but rather feed directly into the stereotypes that Sophia mentioned at the start. So here we go. Now the slides. This is an image from promoting the film. So this is the Hubot, which they're called, humanoid robots, Anita. She's portrayed in a very specific way, a very gentle robot, moves slowly through the spaces. She enacts a very caring affect, passing very much as a human, but also invokes very particular stereotypes that are both gendered and racialized. So in our article, we draw parallels between Anita and the figure of the au pair, which is a domestic worker that does not have the same status as the real humans in the household, of course. And Anita is very interested, and there's also how, because in the series they draw a line with caring for very young children, but Anita is often portrayed as someone who helps with homework, helps with cooking, cleaning, and just generally makes the life of the white Swedish middle-class family run a lot better. As a contrast to the Hubot Anita, there is the Hubot Vera. Vera is very different. They are both embodied as women, but Vera is very unlike Anita in her way of being in the world, but also in the way of caring. She is not very gentle. She's resuscitating her charge, the old man Leonard, who lives in his house alone only because he can have one of these Hubots to take care of him. She's her way of caring is not through sort of gentle care, but rather brusquely controlling, measuring Leonard's values in the night when he's sleeping, denying him foods that she, or the robot, it considers bad for him. And so this type of carer is very different from the sort of servile or servant type of care that Anita represents. So here I'm comparing her to sort of strict care with the figure of the matron, or someone, a nun, or someone from an institution with a particular kind of attitude for what care is. Care as control, care as taking over almost the life of, rather than Anita's way of facilitating and looking at how or being around to perceive and to sort of accommodate the needs. Vera will decide the needs and act on them rather. So I brought these two Anita here and Vera together, because I think when we talk about gender and robotics, it's also very important not to universalize what we mean when we talk about gender. There are, of course, a lot of gendered stereotypes, and here I've presented 2 of them to you, but to also see how stereotypes are diverse and how they work and do different kinds of work. So in the Caring Futures project, we are hoping that looking at care can be a way of nuancing also the stereotypes and what we mean when we talk about gender diversity. Because we know that in the healthcare sector, there is an overweight of women workers. We also know that there is that women have a tendency to live a bit longer than men. So the older population is also not gender balanced in that sense. And so to try and track where questions of gender show up and matter. So I know this is about design of robots, but I think that the TV series is, of course, from the imaginaries of how you could design a caring robot. And what is interesting in this TV series is precisely that it has different kinds of carers, which and invoking different kinds of stereotypes that are linked to specific types or different types of gender and different kinds of racialization. And here comes the Is it possible to so usually it would be nice to have some questions now before I close my talk, or should I just go with the talk?
As you prefer, you decide.
Okay, so I would like, if there are any questions to this now, that would be really great.
Wonderful. Any questions from the audience on the talk up until this point? You can ask, you can switch on the video, you can write in the chat. I myself think it was very clear.
Yes, that's great to know that it's clear, but it's just, okay, we'll go along with it. But keep in mind, because now I have also done, the reason why I stop and ask for questions now is that I'm, when presenting on stereotypes, you're somehow always complicit in presenting the stereotypes.
Right.
So it's important to acknowledge that, I think, because even if we have, I've tried to show the point of doing this comparison between a fictional robot like Anita and the fictional robot of Vera. I have also, and this is what I want you to notice, I have also made quite stereotypical definitions of them as gendered and racialized robots. So this is just to illustrate how difficult it is to escape the language of stereotype and the language of gendered and racialized figures and imagery that I think we see again in the design of robots. So, and this is a real challenge, I think, to how we think about gender and robotics. But how this is the double-edged sword again that Edward also raised, only in a different manner. It's necessary to call out the stereotypes and try to name them, but at the same time, we also need a new language for talking about these figures, so that we don't end up reproducing the same manners of stereotypes. These are both of these figures are very recognizable, which is of course why they circulate in fiction. And I think Äkta Människor does a really good job of showing that robots can have different gendered expressions, different affects, different different embodiments even. And so it's a series, for those of you who haven't watched it, I strongly recommend it. It's unfortunately only the first season is available on Netflix, but it's trying to exactly as was mentioned in your generous introduction, Sophia, that we might need to reinvent or reimagine even more. So diversity is not enough when we are trying to imagine our robots, at least, well, not in fiction so far, but maybe it is in fiction that the gender fluid robots might arrive, or perhaps not. Okay, so returning to care, which is where I will close, I think that looking at care as a concept, ways of doing care, is a way of trying to address the gendered stereotypes, both acknowledging how gender is not something of its own, it's something that is done and enacted and also inherited through social norms, but it's when we look at and how we care. So we have turned in the Caring Futures project to what we call caring ethics. So caring ethics is a very huge field, and I don't have very much time to go into it here, but caring ethics is a specific kind of ethics that isn't necessarily, as John Tronto reminds us, not just a moral imperative to care for or to care about someone, it's also a practice. It's how we think about those we care for, it's how we receive care. So the bottom line is that humans are fundamentally interdependent on someone else. And with robot care coming more into focus, this is where it gets very interesting. Because does that significant other need to be a human? I'm back to the first slide of the hand. There is, of course, another stereotype lurking in the background here, which is that one of cold technologies versus warm hands. But I think if we can try to develop robots that can be more sensitive to stereotypes of care, not just stereotypes of gender or race or sexualities, but stereotypes of care, we could come a bit further in the work of trying to find new ways of rethinking both design and also how we think about and imagine our robots in fiction, of course. And with that, I think I will end. If there are any questions now, that would be really great.
Many thanks, Ingrid, for this very fascinating presentation. Very original as well. Is there any question from the audience? Again, you can use the chat.
So I recognize that this is less hands-on and less developed than Edward's talk, because this project is 1 year into its work. But instead of focusing on gender as a concept, we can look on how care is gendered, which is basically the main takeaway from this talk.